Tales of Vesperia initially launched in North America on the Xbox 360, and it was there, apparently 10 years ago, that I first played it. When the game's 10-year anniversary rolled around, Bandai Namco announced the release of a new Definitive Edition. This Definitive Edition was essentially an enhanced port that finally brought the additional content from the PS3 version to the West, and added in dual audio options to boot. When this was announced, I was taken a bit aback. I was all for giving myself an excuse to replay the game, and I was ecstatic to see that it would no longer be locked to the Xbox 360, a console that the most hardcore JRPG enthusiasts, for obvious reasons, just didn't gravitate to. Instead, it would now be releasing on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PC, and the Nintendo Switch. Simply because the Nintendo Switch is what I had hooked up on the day of this game's release, that's the system I bought the game on and will be reviewing it on today. But what had taken me aback was the idea that this game was 10 years old. It wasn't really that long ago I played Tales of Vesperia, was it? This was one of the first games that I played when I moved out of my parents to live on my own. And I swear I'm not really that old. Am I? Regardless, I was chomping at the bit to give it a replay. When I booted up the game for the first time, I was hit with two similar yet very distinct realizations. I put the game in. I selected English because that's what I played it in before and wanted to hear it in again, and then I realized it. Holy crap, this game is 10 years old. This theme hit me like blunt force nostalgia straight to the head. I was not ready for this feeling. It came rushing to me in a matter of seconds. Apparently, I had been missing this game more than I realized. But then my second realization came, about 10 minutes into the game, when I seen its directing.
What the? Who's there?
Oh, this game is 10 years old. Suffice to say the least, some of it has aged. And that was something I wasn't quite ready to realize yet either. But that's not to say that aging has left it undesirable. Far from it, in fact. I actually find a lot of things they done in the old games would be good to do in the new ones, and I don't know why they abandoned some of these ideas. But we'll get into all of that in time. Now let's leave my personal history behind and start talking about this game with the story. The game starts off like a take on Disney's Aladdin. Our main character Yuri may not be a street rat like Aladdin was, but he is at least from the poor side of town, a place typically referred to as the lower quarter. Our diamond in the rough has a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and he doesn't mind taking things from the privileged upper class folk to give to the downtrodden poor folk just trying to get by. He also has a bit of a habit of causing trouble for the royal guards, and just generally teasing them. One day, while chasing a mysterious stranger who stole a valuable item from the lower quarter, Yuri finds himself trespassing on private property and ends up getting himself caught and imprisoned in the palace jail. Though it isn't exactly Jafar who gets him away out of prison, he does find a way to escape, and while escaping he meets Estelle, a royal gal who's never been outside the castle walls. From here, Yuri, Estelle, and the genie, repeat because he's blue, leave the castle. Yuri continues his quest to find the thief who robbed the lower quarter, and Estelle is looking for a knight and old friend of Yuri's named Flynn. Anything beyond this point would be spoilers, but that's the basic setup. You start by chasing a thief. The reason the thief was stealing and why they were stealing what they were, however, is the mystery that will ultimately fuel the adventure of this game. Tales of Vesperia's adventure is almost anything but unique. However, it's the comfortable kind of familiarity that I love in this genre. It is what I would consider to be a quintessential JRPG adventure. It has all the JRPG tropes in terms of its locales and some of its events along the way. Things we've seen 100 times before. The phantom ships, spirits of the elements, colosseums, floating cities, mana cannons, etc., etc. It's all here and accounted for. This isn't a bad thing. In cinema, we have a near infinite amount of chick flicks involving boy meets girl. We also have an infinite amount of slasher flicks with knife-wielding maniacs, and action movies with loose cannon cops on the edge. Yet most of them manage to feel rather unique from their contemporaries. If anything, these basic overused plot points or locations are just window dressing for the story of our characters and their chemistry. And the characters and chemistry in Tales of Vesperia are fantastic. The first time I played this game 10 years ago, I didn't feel the story was all that great, and I guess really, the actual story itself is pretty typical. But I feel I understood the characters much better this time around, and my feelings towards it have greatly improved. Our main cast is just so darn intriguing. Yuri is an almost uncharacteristically dark character, and by uncharacteristic, I mean for the franchise. Velvet in Tales of Vesperia may be the only dark character to give him a run for his money, but even her actions don't really feel like they live up to his legacy. When Velvet behaves in ways some may call evil, it feels impassioned, like an extension of her being that's beyond her control, a genuine and uncontrollable response to overwhelming emotion. In that regard, it feels a little easier to give her leeway and understanding. Yuri, on the other hand, is more comparable to somebody like Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, but with a much larger moral gray zone. He's very charismatic, outgoing, generally understanding. He has a sense of humor and a real personality. Yet, at the flick of a switch, it seems he can turn it all off and become a cold and calculated individual, simply running numbers in the back of his head, looking for a net gain scenario in any situation, and he'll do whatever is necessary to see that net gain scenario to fruition. Though it's undeniable his actions are for the greater good, there's a constant question as to whether or not his actions make him a bad guy or not. This is highlighted in his rivalry with his friend Flynn as well. Like Flynn, Yuri used to be a knight. Both of them sought knighthood so that they could cleanse the political system of corruption and broken laws. Yet Yuri lost faith in the path and abandoned the knight, and sought to change things in his own way, while Flynn remained a knight and sought to change the system from within. Yuri and Flynn are two different solutions to the same problem, but they are solutions that work at odds to one another. The two butt heads many times as the game goes along, and it always raises interesting questions and thoughts. This rivalry between friends is a strong point of this game's narrative to me, and one of the biggest reasons I would give anybody to go on this adventure. We can look at this deeper and be all like, look at the visual storytelling. Flynn wears white, Yuri wears black. What does it all mean? Flynn's belt has 3 loopholes and Yuri's has none. They're so opposite. But I think it's fine to leave it where it is. While many other characters offer some deep intrigue, there is a lot of surface level charm to this game too. Just look at Patty, she's so cute. And Repeat here is a dog with a pipe, so BTFO Luke. And the rest of the cast like Raven, Carol, Rita, they're just fun characters with fun visual appeal. Some of them like to play the same note over and over again, like Raven never shutting up about how old he is. But it's still got a classic kind of charm to it. I couldn't help but enjoy it. The pace of the story is also a pretty strong point here. Although the final arc tends to stretch itself out, this roughly 50 to 60 hour adventure is a pretty snappy ride. So many RPGs I've played lately have cutscenes and exposition dumps that are so long you'd think the games are visual novel hybrids, but this game is anything but that. Aside from a few key scenes, almost nothing stops gameplay for more than a couple minutes at a time here. Cutscenes, cinematics, skits, it's all pretty straight and to the point, and you never feel like you're missing anything important or that it's somehow moving too fast. Now, I don't mind more wordy games, but this was quite refreshing. And given this is an RPG, it's not like there's only the main plot. There is a fair bit of side stuff to find, but the game doesn't really give you any sort of easy guide to finding it. Vesperia is also the proud owner of my favorite side quest line in Tales' history, the Giganto Monsters. This is just a simple quest of going around killing massive and super powerful monsters, but man is it a rewarding challenge. Personally, I leave them all until nearly the very end, and then tackle them like it was some sort of boss rush mode. It seems to appeal to my baser desires, and it's just darn fun. Now, I might not have cared about this game's narrative that much 10 years ago, but I'm willing to concede that 10 years ago I was probably just wrong. What is ordinary and cliche in Tales of Vesperia is honestly just kind of comfortable, and what I missed in the character writing 10 years ago I realize now, and I greatly appreciate the game for it. Although I could go on, it's probably for the best that I don't. So we're gonna move on and jump into the area that I think new players are gonna struggle with the most. So let's take a look at the battle system. So if you played any Tales of game in the last 15 or so years, you know how most of this works. It's an action RPG system with full 3D motion. Enemies can be seen on the map, and how you approach them changes the advantages you have at the start of battle. You can personally control anybody you want, and they all play differently, or you can just stick with Yuri. Standard equip menus are here, and they menu in ways standard to equipping. Your team is limited to 4 people, and if you so desire, you can play with other real-life breathing humans, providing you know any, and they can control the other characters in local co-op. The face buttons are dedicated to pretty standard things. General attacks, which can be used at no cost. Art, the character-specific attacks that unlock through leveling, which are used at a cost to TP, a menu button, and a block button. Shoulder buttons control your targeting and your ability to free run, and your D-pad controls your overlimit usage. Movement is done with the left analog stick, and the right one can be used to assign shortcuts for additional arts. Arts come in different forms and with a different level of combo ability. First you have your low-cost base arts, then you have your higher-cost altered arts, then you have your burst arts, which can typically only be used during overlimit and only after other arts, and then you have your mystic art, which can only be used at level 3 overlimit or higher, provided you gained the appropriate skills. Depending on how you attack your enemies as well, you may also get the chance for a fatal strike, which helps inject extra moments of excitement to the loop of combat. This is all pretty typical and it works. However, I did say some of this game feels dated, and combat is one of those areas where that rings most true. At least at the start of the game it does. Starting out, Tales of Vesperia's combat is a little rough. Combo chains are short, cooldowns are long, and maneuvers are limited. The reason for this lies mostly in the skill system. Each weapon and sub-weapon has skills. Skills can be a number of things like XP share, additional vitality or defense, new arts, damage reflection, longer combo chains, backsteps, and more. These are things that you cannot do in combat if you don't have a weapon with these skills equipped, or if you haven't used weapons long enough to learn these skills permanently. What this means is that Tales of Vesperia actually has a massive and amazingly fleshed out battle system, but it is stripped away to the absolute basics at the start of the game, so that the battle system will feel like it has a greater sense of progression. However, the basics are very, very basic. Battle at the front end of the game feels stiff and awkward. Coming into an older game, it does make it feel dated, and that can scare away new players. All I can say is, stick with it and really pay attention to your skills. It's worth it. Now, while I will make a little bit of an excuse for how battle feels at the start of the game, there are some aged parts of this game that I can't really make excuses for. In battle, that biggest area is definitely the party AI. Tales of has a long history of bad party AI, and Vesperia is no exception. Granted, you can control to a degree what each character is allowed to do, it seems that they rarely listen. So many times magic users will pointlessly run at enemy faces for melee attacks, or they'll allow themselves to live with poison or sealed arts for an ungodly amount of time. Yet at the first sign that they might be running low on TP, they gobble up all of your orange gel. If it's any other item, they're in no hurry to use it. For instance, I see you're trying to use that life bottle repeat, so how about you, oh, I don't know, here's a novel idea. Use the life bottle. Stop attacking and actually use it. It's impossible to get the AI right where you want it, but I found in any important battle, if I just switched my party AI to be on defense rather than anything else, they would generally hold out much better. They still made stupid decisions, it was just less frequent. Now, I may be a little hard on some aspects of this, but personally, after the first couple hours, I did love this battle system. And maybe I'm looking a bit too deep for more silver linings in its age here, but the limitations in Tales of Vesperia bring something to the series that has sadly been missing since Grace's F and onward, and I'm more than happy to see this return. I'm talking about difficulty. Yes, I actually seen the game over screen in this game on normal difficulty and at normal story points. A few times in fact. At one point, I even got stuck. Now, the AI might have been the reason for 1 or 2 game overs, and that's not really acceptable. But more than anything, it was actually the balance of the game that was causing me difficulty. This game doesn't give you so much to work with that you can find cheap or easy ways out of a tough situation, like Zestiria's OP armatizations or Berseria's Consuming Claw. No disrespect to Berseria, but as I said in my review for that game, it was a little easier than I would have liked it to be. I think Vesperia gets its difficulty just right. And that's all I'm going to say on the battle system. From there, let's jump into some fun technical aspects of Tales of Vesperia, because this is a little bit of a weird one. Suffice to say, I played this on the Switch, the least powerful system out there, and it did of course take a hit compared to other systems. Where other versions run in 1080p at 60 FPS for the entirety of the game, the Switch version, while docked, runs in 1080p 60 FPS in battle, but only 1080p 30 FPS outside of battle. They put the higher frame rate where it was more needed, and I'm grateful for that, but it is a little surprising this Xbox 360 game wasn't optimized for 60 FPS everywhere on the Switch. When the game's undocked, the game drops to 720p as that's the max the screen allows, and it seems to run just fine. At no point did I ever have a performance issue. No really long load times, no audio issues, no crashes, nothing. Maybe I got lucky, but it all just seemed to work. That said, despite this game being in 1080p like the other versions, it's clear after just a moment of looking that it has taken a graphical hit anyway. An excessively minor one, hardly worthy of note, but you can see a bit more jagged lines on character outlines and such. The music is your typical Motoi Sakuraba fare, and it fits.
Just go away!
The voice work is a strange one, and a first for this channel. I mentioned earlier that the game now has dual audio. That's always a plus. It also has more voiced lines than the original Tales of Vesperia release in the West, which means they had to rehire the old cast and record a bunch of new lines. However, one cast member was not called back, the voice of Yuri, our main character. Instead, he was recast. At different points in the game, Yuri will be voiced by 2 different people, and I'll give credit where it's due. Though it can be jarring at times, the new voice actor typically does a great impression. If it weren't for the slight differences in audio quality likely caused by using different microphones and compression techniques than the original, I probably wouldn't have noticed the change most of the time.
I'm Yuri. What's your name? Should we head back, or... I'm Yuri. What's your name? Should we head back, or...
So overall, despite one unique quirk, the voice acting is pretty good. It's cheesy and dated and melodramatic, but in all of the best ways. It's got a bit of a retro dubbed anime aesthetic going on, and I rather like it. The graphics are what I picture when I think of an ideal graphic style for the series. There's more focus on colors and shading than actual textures. It's very cartoony and looks great with some high contrast settings on your monitor. Character designs and monster designs are great, and there was very clear attention put into small details, like different areas of the world having their own chests and mimic designs. And just take a look at this shark guy, for instance. He might look unremarkable at a glance, but his axe is a burb. It just doesn't get much better than that. Now, given this is a port of an old game, I figured they could have addressed some issues the old game had, such as typos that have been known about for 10 years. These aren't a big deal and they're very uncommon, but still. Was why... Come on guys, you could have fixed this. Cutscene direction could have been cleaned up a bit too, where these feel more dated than anything else due to a generally more stilted nature and a strange absence of sound effects. But maybe that's beyond the scope of what this port was intended to be, and maybe it would have altered the original release more than people wanted. Regardless, at the end of the day, Tales of Vesperia is a great entry in the franchise. Some areas may feel dated, but I've always thought of this as the prime example of a Tales of game. The story is very Tales of, the art, characters, and graphic style is exactly what I picture when I think of Tales of. The composer Motoi Sakuraba has worked on so many of these games now, that his name is basically synonymous with the franchise. Every game from this point onward stripped something away from what I consider to be the Tales of identity, and while that doesn't make the rest of the games bad, it has made me gradually miss the older days of the series more and more. Just revisiting this RPG and seeing a real overworld again was like a breath of fresh air. Or rather, a breath of highly desirable old air. But that sounds kinda gross, so we're gonna stick with the first way I said it. Anyway, you guys get the picture. Of course I like Tales of Vesperia. I like nearly this whole franchise. This game captures the identity of what I like about this franchise, possibly more than any other game in the series. If you're a fan of the series and you missed this the first time, whether it was because it was on Xbox 360, or you just didn't have the time, now is the perfect time to give it a go. Just don't give up too fast if you're feeling it's slightly dated. And that's all I'm gonna say on it. If you guys liked the video or found it useful or helpful at all, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you can. If you really like the content and you want to consider supporting the show on Patreon. Links are in the description. As always, folks, thanks for watching.
I give my